and no man cometh unto the Father but through him. Should we pay workers who fail to do the job they were employed to do? Should we join them in their crimes in failing to do what they were asked to do and then pay them? You know, if somebody's in a position in government and they're supposed to fulfill a certain role and schedule, and they fail to do so, your paying them is aiding them and abetting them and ratifying their action. When you pay somebody who's corrupt, you seal the deal. You say, I agree, you've done a job that's acceptable before my eyes, be paid. Such that Jesus says he has no pleasure in the one that falls back, in the lukewarm worker, the lazy one. He has no pleasure in him. How can he? He's sitting on his hands in a time of war, in a time of battle, sitting on his hands. How could you have pleasure in that one? So we have our government supposed to have scheduled the testing of the constitutionality of specific sections, which are a matter of great public interest, which they fail to publicise and fail to fulfil in the High Court of this country. And now they want payment. I employed a solicitor's firm, and they have failed to communicate with me on an ongoing basis. They've communicated more with the opposition. They've communicated more with the courts than with me. Remotely dealing with this and remotely dealing with that, telling me at the last minute what the court had decided after the fact, often the day before, that they were doing something remotely, and I would get the link and I'd try the link and it wouldn't bring me into the hearing. I heard nothing of what happened in the High Court, though it were to do with me and a 7-month prison sentence that they later quashed. Nothing. So should I pay that counsel? Should I say, right, you've done a good job, right, here you go, there's your money? No, if somebody paints a wall and they painted it yellow when you asked them to paint it blue, you might say, all right, look, it's just a different colour, I'll give you the few quid. You made a mistake, but the job is good. But when they don't actually paint the wall at all, stand there leaving it in a worse state of disrepair, should you pay them? Should you actually pay them and therefore ratify their evil, their laziness and their failure to fulfill their station? Should you encourage them in that? Say, well done, good job, here's a handful of money. Because all you're doing is encouraging them to do more evil, and you're telling them that you think that what they're doing is satisfactory and acceptable. If my own counsel don't communicate with me, they're no longer my counsel. If they're communicating more with the opposition, to the opposition's counsel. Why? Because they're talking through what's going to happen with the other side. That's how it kind of works in the absence of the one you're defending. Well, in the High Court now, there's a hearing. It's more of an academic level. It's at a high level where people who are educated to a standard are testing things. They haven't done that in the High Court. They said they were going to do that, but they didn't do it. They didn't test the constitutionality of the sections. And I'm not surprised, because who would want to put their name to that? Say, we've been taught a thing or two by a citizen of the state. We have to humble ourselves here and accept that we've done wrong, that these legislations need to be removed. But those who are arrogant and bold are reluctant to humble themselves. They'll go around in false humility. They'll say, well, we're humble folk. Yeah, we drive the Mercedes, but that's just a car. Needs tires and services just like yours. It's just a car. Why is it 3 times as big as you need? False humility. Ostentatiousness wrapped up in false humility. And what we're seeing here is we're seeing a neglect, an absolute reluctance to accept that they haven't done their job. And how do we see this? How do we identify this? Because they're now asking for payment. No, do you know, I haven't heard what the court have said finally on the 16th of June, yet I have received a form from counsel, those who are claiming to be my counsel but failing to be, for payment. They need me to give them a form that's a means test so they can get paid by the government. Should I furnish them with my means even before they tell me what happened in the court? But it's the court's job to compensate somebody who's been ill-treated, according to the law, to vindicate their good name, property rights, etc. But they're telling me it's up to me to issue plenary proceedings? I don't even know what the legal costs yet are. How could I possibly issue plenary proceedings? How would they quantify a man being told he can't speak in public for 2 years? How would they value that monetarily? It's not up to the citizen to bring about the vindication of his own name. It's up to those who purported to remove it in the first place. That's the job of the state. It's in the Constitution, Article 40, Section 6, subsection I. And what's happening? They're utterly showing that they're not competent at least, and highly corrupt at worst. And you can't, in my opinion, be that incompetent at that level. So we have exposed corruption. Should I aid and abet that corruption by seeking to pay it or facilitate it being paid by the Irish state, who were not kept in the loop as to what was happening in the High Court in a matter of public interest? Well, then I would actually be aiding and abetting them in their failure to do their job, and therefore I would be conspiring with them in a way that is aggressively non-committal. And I'm not willing to non-committally pay them and facilitate their corruption. Do you know that the one who's asking for pay is on holidays right now? And he hasn't even told me what happened in the High Court on the 16th of June, and he wants payment? This man wants payment on holidays, and he hasn't even done his job. It isn't that rich, Ireland. And this is going on in your High Court. And these people are telling me that they're my counsel? How are they my counsel? In what aptitude? On what level? They haven't been communicating with me. They haven't brought Section 6 to be tested before the Constitution like they said they would. The conversations I had with them, I might as well not have had with them, because they didn't affect anything that I asked them to affect. The only thing that took place was a judicial review. They didn't even satisfy a lesser court, because the circuit court's adjournment was on the basis that they would test the constitutionality of those sections. So they have not only not done right by the Irish public, by me as an individual citizen, they have also failed the circuit court of the state. They're failing on every level of their office. And now they're asking for payment? The judge shouldn't be paid, because they haven't done the schedule. Let alone my counsel. They haven't even told me what happened on the 16th of June. I haven't had any conclusion. And yet the solicitor went off on holidays. Whatever happened to a text message, an email, a phone call? You know, I haven't received a phone call from my counsel in a year. A year! I think it's actually maybe more than a year. That can't be right, if I'm not mistaken. But very rarely. And I actually heard about the conclusion of the judge many days after it had occurred, by email. I got a link to the circuit, to the courts.ie. That's all I got. What everybody else in Ireland got after the fact. Nobody was kept in the loop on this matter of public interest. The High Court has failed in its basic schedule, My counsel have failed and shown themselves to be at least highly incompetent and at worst conspiring with the state. And I feel confident in saying that because they've spoken more to the state than me. And they're both failing in their directives. When you employ counsel, they have to do what you ask them to do, or they're not representing you. If they do what the High Court or another party asks them to do, they're showing bias and conspiring with them. I witnessed conspiracy in a circuit court in Wexford, where the judge would allow the prosecution to decide the conditions of the adjournment, even after I had been told the adjournment was granted, and that I only had to come in to hear that ruling. They're all the time setting you up to just use you as a pawn in their game. And now they want payment when they failed to be my counsel, when the High Court have failed to follow the schedule. They have failed on every level, but now they want money. They want money, they want the means test done so they can get the state money, because they know that I'm currently unemployed on social welfare. I've applied for over 50 jobs in Wexford. Is it any surprise that I haven't gotten a job when they had my name in the newspaper saying I was a racist, homophobe? Yet the High Court judge, having found that my conviction should be quashed and that I had done nothing unlawful, failed to motion to vindicate my life, as is their constitutional responsibility under Article 40, Section 6. They're failing and failing and failing and failing and failing. And there's no way they can be that incompetent and that lacking in knowledge on these matters at High Court level. And if they are, they should be sacked for the sake of the courts. So we're just seeing a pathetic, absolutely pathetic, limp-fisted effort here, trying to use a preacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ as a pawn in their game of corruption to integrate into their windy web of corrupted rootings. Here, we'll just kind of hide you in that root mass there. See how you get out of that. Well, the Constitution exposes them. It is the light that causes that root mass to disappear and to fade. And they will submit to the light of Jesus Christ the righteous. And they will effectively have to satisfy the schedule of the court, because it has been brought for testing before the state. And if they therefore fail to actually test what has been brought to be tested, as my counsel have failed to bring what I asked them to bring before the High Court, then how should they be paid or considered as doing their job? How can I justify paying my counsel if they don't communicate with me that they're not doing what I'm asking them to do? If you employ somebody to paint a wall and they don't paint it, do you pay them? How can you? You'd only be encouraging their evil, and you'd be out of pocket. Assuming you had the money to throw around, you'd only be encouraging them to do nothing. And when you're at High Court level having something tested that is integral to the social order, it's not just a matter of you're encouraging laziness. It's a matter of you're now aiding and abetting serious levels of corruption by paying for it and not exposing it. Because you're paying for it, whether you realize it or not. Your taxpayers' money pays the people involved. And they're asking me to fill out a means test sheet now to issue the firm with, who have failed to represent me at all. They're saying this is a great win for you, focus on that, you've won. How have I won? Because I'm not in jail? That means I've won. What have I won? When they've been shown to have treated me unlawfully, I've lost. They're saying I've won claims that they've nothing to reimburse, nothing to vindicate, because I would have already had the victory. It's not a victory when somebody doesn't enter into your house and rob you. That's not seen as a victory. Oh, you're winning there. Nobody's after breaking your door down and robbing all your goods and killing your family. Well done, you won. Or after somebody comes into your house and steals everything, say, oh, they didn't steal you anymore. Oh, you're winning. Well done. They stopped robbing from you. But they haven't stopped robbing from the Irish people. And now they're asking me to be a pawn in their game by submitting means. They want to rob the Irish people in perpetuity and use this as a little piece in their puzzle. They want to keep those legislations in place that gives them the facility to keep harassing preachers. Because I was told by a member of An Garda Síochána that was his sole intention. Oh, if I get a complaint and you've offended somebody again, this whole thing starts over again. Excuse me, the whole thing starts over again, even though the High Court saw that I was perfectly innocent. And you're confident enough to stand there on the side of the road and say that? The boldness of these people and the way they go on holidays. Them and their associates. Coincidentally? But absolutely no problem. It's emailed over to you there. As quick as you like. Fill out that means testing form there. Do you know that that's the only form of text I've gotten from them in over a year prior to a document they sent me in an email with regard to finances. But they have 1,500 euros of a surety in my name, and they've made no effort to give it back. The court hearing was on the 16th of June. These things should be done within a 7-day business week. Any longer is inexcusable. That's a maximum of 9 days. But they're on holidays and want me to fill out a means testing form so that they can get paid from you. Are you seeing the level of corruption that's being exposed? It's a pirate ship, not a court. That's a pirate ship. And they sit around the place mimicking and making noises. They're only making noises. They're not doing their jobs. They're not actually fulfilling their office according to the organs of state and what's incumbent upon them, what's placed upon them as their responsibility. The reason they get paid from week to week and their family fed is that they fulfill that office. They want to fail to do that and still get fed. Do you know, putting on the garment and sitting on the seat doesn't constitute doing your job as a judge. Following the Constitution and upholding the law does. Presentation is just a basic requirement for a man. These are criminals. It's gone on too long for it to be anything else. And it's at High Court level now. They can't say, oh, it's the misinformation of a municipality or a lower court. trickle-down effect. We didn't know. We had to submit to the higher courts. We had to submit to the legislation. We had to. And it's been before the High Court now, and they've said, well, maybe there's a more appropriate case. It's an open question, question mark, question mark, question mark. They've failed to fulfill the schedule. It was written in the schedule. How is there a more appropriate case? Is a more appropriate case a woman's cat getting robbed out of a tree? Would that be more fitting? Or a case where you have a relevant person in terms of what they've been accused of, pertaining to, facilitated by the sections 115, 117, 114, 113 of the Criminal Justice Act 2006 and Section 7 of the Criminal Justice Public Order Act 1994. Have they tested any of those? They're the High Court? Comparing things to the Constitution? My counsel said that we would have these things tested. Bing! Did they do it? Do they want to get paid? Bing! Do we pay people who don't do what they've said they're going to do? Why? Because they're crooks. Because they're cowboys. Ding! Should we encourage people to behave that way in society? Is it more important to teach them to do better when they're in positions of such import as higher courts and legislative positions? Ding! Why? Because it affects everybody in society. So go drinking pina colada on holidays or whatever it is and send something via email to get paid for your crookery. What do they think they are, drug dealers? Do they think they're drug dealers? That they sit in the sun while their boys run around? These are held accountable before the Constitution of the state. They can't get away from the black and white on the paper. These are running in a way that you can't run. They're running with one foot tied to the ground. They're running in circles, kicking things down the road. I will do that later. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll see you next Tuesday. I won't tell you which Tuesday, missus. Remember Dustin the turkey? And they're running and kicking things down the road and run a little bit more. They have time to put in an appeal. Okay, 16th passes. Did the appeal go in? I'm on holidays. What happened in the court on the 16th of June in the High Court of Ireland? I'm on holidays. Did you fill out that means test form there? And then we'll see you. You come to us when you have that form filled out and we'll talk to you. Or you'll talk to me after you have the means to be paid, but not before. How can I tell you what my means are until I hear what the court are intending to do about compensation? By the way, that's part of your job, to ensure the court upholds its constitutional incumbencies. How can I pay you until that's done? You want to talk money, but you're on holidays. And your secretary is not available because she's on annual leave. And there's somebody answering the phone who I have never spoken to before. It's like Monty Python or something. It's so otherworldly and nonsensical that it could only be something born out of the pit. But they want to play silly beggars on holidays on a lounger. What's happening? What you doing? We have to have a And they go around, oh, mimicking and messing, behaving like little boys. When what they're doing is so dastardly and evil, and they play dumb. Oh no, you need to have a very intellectual conversation over your head with somebody in a garment now, so that we can pull rank on you and tell you to stay in your lane. But it can only be after you've paid us. Okay? And they might even be sitting in a higher chair to you in terms of geography. So they'll be looking down their nose at you, and then they'll speak in that voice and say, well, no, Stephen, I must correct you on this. According to the law, it does say in the of the blah, 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 that you must, and the court can do this under this very rare thing that we've found here, this sort of loophole that the court can actually do this. We're really sorry, but this is the best we can do. And if you want to pursue this, you can do that on your own finances now. But in terms of us actually doing anything that you need us to do, we're just not going to do it. But we need you to sign this document here so we can get paid. And so we can put this thing to bed. So should I then run home like a good little boy and fill out the form, yay, and email it off to them so that they can get paid for their corruptions and failings? How would I be doing right by the citizens of Ireland? How would I be doing right by the little ones in buggies and prams if I was to actually say, no, these men should be paid? Absolutely, these men should be paid. They did a good job by doing nothing they were asked to do. Well done. Thank you for failing the Irish people, failing the Irish Constitution, implementing legislations that basically undermine the Irish Constitution. You know what? Let's pay these people. Well, even while they're on the holiday lounger. What do they think we are? Do they think the Irish people are stupid? Do they think that we lack basic logic and common sense? Because we're not all drunk holding up the bar stool. On good old sea legs. But what we do is we expose their corruption. Why? Because that's what you're supposed to do when evil rears its ugly head. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to protect the babies in their buggies by maintaining the integrity of the constitution of the state, which protects their rights and freedoms. And when men, albeit they speak with a proper they speak proper language and have good grasp of grammar, and a good degree of learnedness, come from good stock, and read through Trinity or whatever college it is, all the mannerisms, stiff upper lip, they might go through all the motions of it, and use big words every now and again that nobody could possibly know unless they went to Trinity. But just mean the same thing as more basic words, just to kind of throw you and say, well, just remember that you're lower. The IQ scale in the world, it rewards high IQ. You should know that, and you're rather less than us. So just kind of submit to this. What can you do? You're on the dole. You don't have a lot of money available to you. How are you going to chase this up now? We've told you, you must pay us, but it's up to you to issue plenary proceedings. So you're on your Todd on that one there. Do you know that the Law Society is a society unto itself? But they're all drinking tea in the same coffee shops, and coffee or whatever it is. You know that? So we as the Irish people have to hold them accountable because they're a little community. So we have to hold them accountable to the law, lest their inner dynamics in their inner circles start to influence their behaviors. Oh, you owe me one, or you owe me. We have to hold them accountable to the Constitution. You know, they say, well, money talks. When money talks, well, let's make it talk. Because if council don't get paid, where are they going to look for their money? And how can I justifiably pay them if they haven't fulfilled what I've asked them to do as an Irish citizen? Does the fact that I'm on the dole lessen my rights? Does a homeless man have less constitutional freedoms to express himself than somebody in a mansion? What kind of Ireland would that be? How dare the poor man not pay me? How dare the poor man use money? We're the ones that use money. Well, you can make money your God whether you don't have enough of it or you have too much of it. Money isn't my God. It's theirs. Jesus is my God. He's the one that institutes all powers. You cannot serve two masters. Either you love the one and hate the other, or you despise the one and love the other, but you cannot serve God and mammon. Mammon being representative or worship of money. I don't worship money. I don't care for money. We need it, a little bit of it, to go in and out and around and have a house and some clothes and a razor, whatever you need for day-to-day stuff. But other than that, money isn't my God. You can not have enough money and be constantly patting your pocket. You're idolizing money because you haven't got enough of it. You're thinking about it too much. I'm not making this about money. Money is just the mode of payment. They're making it about money. They're saying money has to be made sure before we'll even talk to you about what happened on the 16th of June. They're putting a barrier to communication and therefore failing to deserve payment. Counsel is all about communication. How have they counseled me if they're not communicating? They failed in the basic administrative aspect of their role. Forget about, for a second, the fact that they utterly failed to bring the constitutionality of those sections before the High Court. In terms of Section 7, after having discussed it and agreed that this must be tested because in other jurisdictions it had been shown that the word insulting was too vague to have as an indefinite term in law, being a hinge, something that criminality can hinge upon, as a mechanism that can result in somebody being criminalized because somebody was insulted on the streets. So in other jurisdictions, they've removed this word from the wording. So my counsel said, I agree with you, that's too vague, it's been removed in other jurisdictions, we need to have this tested, but they didn't bring it for testing. It wasn't tested. Section 7, 117 and Section 115 weren't tested. Even though they're in the schedule, you can check it yourself in courts.ie, Stephen Town versus the DPP. You can see it yourself. Number 1 on the schedule, testing the constitutionality, Section 115, 117. Paraphrasing. Read it yourself. And then you'll see down the bottom it says, it remains an open question as to whether 115 and 117. Why is it an open question? You failed in your directive as the High Court. You're alluding to a more appropriate case, but you haven't specified the conditions of said case. That's avoiding. That's utterly failing as the High Court of Ireland in your directive, in your schedule. But you want to be paid? You just ask somebody to paint the wall and he doesn't paint it. Do you pay him? If your own counsel doesn't actually do what they agreed was a good idea to do, how are they your counsel? If they don't bring that, if they're not representing your wishes, they're no longer your counsel. It might be somebody else's. Then why would I pay them? You go to a financial advisor and he advises your friend Bob instead. You're not going to advise me my finances here? Bob. Okay, well, Bob can pay you then. But you see, what you're seeing is they're not doing their job. Oh. There's a hole in the ship, lads. There's a hole in the ship. Certainly is the Undertaker. Bob. Bobbing around in the water. Listen. If you don't expose corruption, you facilitate it, having become aware of it. Yeah, I saw him bashing her down, walking down. Why didn't you tell us? Well, it's none of my business. What? I've seen you having chats with Mary, talking to her. Why wouldn't you try to protect her? What's the point? You chat with her, share a sandwich with her during the day at the coffee shop, and you see her getting bashed at night, and you walk right by. Well, it was none of my business. You didn't ring the police. You didn't have to get physically involved, but you didn't even attempt to ring the guards. You didn't even report on it. You didn't expose it. There's a guy going around bashing people at night, and you're aware of it, and you say nothing about it. How are you in any way caring about the people that are walking around in society if you're not going to try to restrain evil in society? Why do you even say hi, Mary, and smile if you're not going to try to protect Mary from the madman that goes around at night? Oh no, I like Mary, but you know, she has to look after herself. Alright, so we'll just let all the animals out of the zoo. Is that the idea? And when the elephant goes on rampage, well, wrong place, wrong time. Because if you fail to hold the High Court accountable, they're like an elephant going around ramming the place. What they're doing is, in a garment, in a civilized fashion, talking properly. They have an appearance of godliness, but denying its head. And when you deny the head of something, the body dies. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the atrophy of the functions of the organs. You're seeing the dying of the organs. And what do we have to do? Revive organs. How do we do that? We put life into them. How do we put life into things? We put light into them. How do you do that? Expose the darkness. Expose the corruption. The Bible says that we have nothing as Christians to do with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. So what are you going to do? Are you going to stand by and watch this corruption? They're on their lounger asking for payment. They haven't done what they've said they're going to do. They haven't. They haven't satisfied their basic function as either my counsel or the judge of the High Court. Neither roles have been satisfactorily fulfilled. They haven't made any motion towards the vindication of my life after having declared that I didn't do anything unlawful, but they want me to give them my means. But I should assume that they will attempt to vindicate my life. So how can I now give my means before they tell me how they're going to go about compensating for the injustices done? There's a surety. They have a €1,500 surety belonging to me. How can I tell them what my means are, available means are, if they're not going to give me back what is mine? Or if they're going to put that on hold until I submit a means test? Even though the €1,500 belongs to the ministry, that's neither here nor there. It's means of the ministry. And this is about the ministry and my personal life. So this affects two aspects of my life, the ministry and my personal life. That which belongs to the ministry is the ministry's. That which belongs to me is mine. And it is a constitutional obligation of an Irish person to fulfill their ministry. It says it in the preamble of the Irish Constitution. It says, in the name of the most holy Trinity, from and to whom as our final end all actions both of men and states must be referred, we the people of Eire humbly acknowledging all our obligations to our divine Lord Jesus Christ. Humbly acknowledging all our obligations. Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to the whole creation. Fulfill your ministry. Fulfill your ministry. Fulfill it. How can you fulfill it, constitutionally speaking, if they're telling you can't talk for 2 years and then telling you you've won? And they've made no effort to compensate the loss. How would they even begin to quantify that loss? How? How can you quantify the loss of 2 years gospel preaching ministry? How? You can't. But the ministry should be facilitated for at least 2 years. What would that cost? One might say, well, that would be reasonable to monetarily facilitate the ministry for 2 years, because that was the loss, monetarily. If you're at least speaking a quantifiable and testable, measurable degree of loss, 2 years of ministry was that loss. But that's what should be compensated at least, speaking solely on the ministry. But what were the personal damages? Well, how can you quantify personal damages? Well, it's at least unemployment for 2 years. Because they can't say whether the libel that occurred in the newspaper affected unemployment or not. So if they were to cover all bases, they would have to reasonably say, well, we have to compensate that person since from when we first intervened and slandered their name, at least as a knock-on effect of what happened in the court and what was not vindicated as it should have been immediately. It should have been said immediately, you simply can't do this. You can't put things like this in the newspaper so vaguely as they can be interpreted as actual established truth. And then do nothing about it to vindicate that person's life. So in adult land, You have to say, well, if I did something that might have affected harm, well, then at least I have to take responsibility for that. And our courts should not be behaving lesser than adults are expected to behave in society. Otherwise, it's like having kindergarten, but with grown-ups. Worse than that, even the children are saying, you have to sit in your chair now and eat your lunch and don't throw your sandwiches around. But they're allowed to throw all sorts of stuff around. They're allowed to use biblical scriptures as evidence against a preacher. And this is an absolute mockery of the Constitution of our country. They can't. It's like they can't help themselves. A preacher having scriptures presented as evidence against him in a court of law. Judge, we found this man singing a song about Jesus. Are they for real? And you need experts at the High Court to test this? We're giving out to the painter for having paint on his clothes. Now you should know better. Look at you. Painting the wall blue and you've got blue in your trousers. What are you doing with blue on your brush? You asked me to paint the wall blue. But there's blue on your brush. You can't be putting blue on your brush. Judge, this man had blue on his brush. This man's a painter. What do you mean he had blue on his brush? He was asked to paint the building blue. This preacher was preaching scriptures. Are they for real? And they want to be paid? Just for sitting around and talking nonsense. For sitting around and talking nonsense, you might call them to see sense. But to sit around and behave in a way that is basically criminal, it would be criminal to attempt to pay them for that. Because now you're actually facilitating it when you pay for it. That's why the man who hires somebody to kill another man gets arrested as well. Because he was the one that monetized it. He was the one that funded it. He made it an industry. He ratified it as being worthy of payment. He established a set of rules apart from that which is considered lawful by the state. All in his Todd. You cannot kill people, therefore you cannot pay somebody else to do it. You cannot break the law and go against the constitution of the state, therefore you can't pay somebody to do it. Or you would be considered as aiding and abetting criminal activity. This is so corrupt on so many levels with so many layers that the only way forward is for them to hold their hands up and say, this is completely wrong. We absolutely have to remove those legislations because they offend basic rights of Irish people. That would include section 113, 114, 115 and 117, because 113 and 114 give mechanism and definition to 115 and 117 such that it would be remiss to test 115 and 117 without testing 113 and 114. It would be remiss of the Irish government to fail to test the word insulting in section 7 merely on the basis that in other jurisdictions it had been removed. That should make them want to sit up and say, other jurisdictions have had it removed. Why, I wonder? Let's see. Is there any wisdom in what they're doing? So on the one hand, they want to say, we should set up unity and concord with other nations, but we ignore when they do something good. Just ignore that bit. But not only that, a preacher of the gospel is the only person to have ever been convicted, taking into account Section 7 of the Criminal Justice Public Order Act, which is actually in place to police drunk people between the hours of 12 midnight and 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. Yet, during the day, it was misapplied to a preacher, and he was the only person ever in Ireland to ever be convicted under it. Yet they don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, I'm a bit taken aback at the level of corruption. Like, it is spiraling downwards at an accelerating rate. The Bible says, be ye angry, yet sin not. Well, what would be the point in going around angry and then paying them? You just say, oh, I won, I'm not in prison. That's a relative victory. No, that would be disastrous. That would be disastrous. So to do. Would that not be just the most peaceful way forward? Like, avoid all this stuff in the High Court? Certain things should be avoided and others should be exposed because of the harmful effects that they facilitate on citizens, because of how they break down the integrity of society. So that's not looking for trouble, that's exposing it. That's exposing what's already corrupt. Paying for it in silence is even facilitating it. It's conspiring with it, actually. Saying, yeah, use me as a pawn. Yeah, I'm happy enough to think that I got off. Now I could go back to preaching. What about the 2 years that they said I wasn't allowed to? What about the month in prison? What about having my name in the newspaper? They called me a homophobe and like some kind of antisocial, whatever it was they said about me, which I forgive them for, but it still wouldn't be right to allow it to continue. What about all of that stuff? They just shrug that off. What about it? I'm not holding it as a grudge. But I'm saying that in Ireland, there is the constitutional incumbency placed upon the High Court that when they recognise an ill has been done to a person's life, that they must go about themselves facilitating the reimbursement or the compensation or the vindication of the property rights and good name of that individual. That's actually their responsibility to motion for that. But they're telling me that now I have to go about plenary proceedings simply because they say, well, like, how do we quantify this? This is going to be a difficult claim. I'm not claiming from an insurance company. I didn't trip over a manhole walking down the road. This is not a claim against the council. It's up to the state to motion this because they have to vindicate the rights, good name, and property rights of the individual. So that wouldn't be the proper mechanism to go, because it's up to the state to do this. They have to be seen to do this because it's their responsibility to uphold the rights of the individual. It's not up to me to say, well, I think it's worth X, Y, Z. It has to be valued by people who are qualified to value such things. And it's not really that complex. If you've denied somebody, because we're only talking about monetary value now, because they can't actually go back in time and not put you under duress and harass you and threaten you of going to prison if you speak. They can't undo that, or the real negative effects of that, spiritually speaking. But that's not what they're being asked to do. That would be unrealistic. So realistically speaking, they're being asked to publicly vindicate the name of the person, which is to say to the local community, this man didn't actually do anything right. That doesn't just set me right, it sets everybody around right, so that they're edified. This man is allowed to do that. We were actually wrong. And see, what's after happening is that it's so rare to see somebody so boldly proclaiming the gospel that the community have begun to see it as a sort of some kind of an imposition. That's a bit loud. I'm licking my ice cream here. Last Friday I licked it and it was quiet. But that doesn't make what's happening unlawful. Just like there's a road sweeping thing going by right now, I'm having to lift my voice a little bit. But he's not doing anything wrong there, simply because I have to raise my voice. He's actually doing a justice and a service to the community by keeping the streets clean for people. And it wouldn't be long if he wasn't doing it before you noticed. He'd be tripping over things if he took a week off. So the point is that I know he's passing by, he's gone up the road now, so he wasn't here very long. But the point is that if you're trying to get a complex message across, you have to reside in the same place for a period of time, because you're trying to actually communicate to the hearts and the minds of the people and present ideas to them. You can't always do that on the move. So there are certain things as a preacher you can do on the move and certain things you can't do on the move. Videos come in handy for the longer things, like an hour video. But please excuse me, because I haven't had the opportunity to express these points to my own council, because they haven't actually given me an hour of their time. But they want to be paid. I mean, I forgive them. I'm not headhunting them or anything. I don't intend to sue anybody or anything of that sort. But people need to be held accountable to what they're supposed to do. Like, you might say, you're asking for money. You didn't paint the wall and you're asking me for money, Mr. Painter. Hold on a second. Paint the wall first. You give them the opportunity to paint the wall. So if you really cared about the painter, say, well, why didn't you paint that wall now? You said you were going to paint it. I've seen you paint other walls. You did a good job. Why didn't you paint my wall? And now you want to be paid? That's not right. You say, all right, you didn't paint the wall, here's €100. How would that be any good to anybody? It's not good for your wall. It's not good for the other people who have to look at your wall. It's not good for the guy you paid when he's supposed to do a job now. He might even think he can do that more regularly. You're setting a standard that's unacceptable and doesn't function. And that's what they're doing in the High Court now by failing to address the schedule. They're going about setting a standard that doesn't actually serve the community. Simply by failing to address the schedule, they've done that. And they want to be paid for it. You say, well, you're paying for their time. Well, hold on a second. The man who was supposed to paint the wall might have sat outside the house for 4 days. He still didn't paint the wall. I know you're paying me by the hour. I've been sitting here for 3 days now. That's, how many hours is that? 48 plus 24. That's a lot of hours. So, will you pay me for all those hours? But you didn't paint the wall. But I showed up. But you didn't paint the wall. So painters paint the wall. Council represent what their client wants done. And they do so in a manner that is normal to court proceedings. Whereas a layman coming in off the street wouldn't know exactly how to approach a judge in every aspects so that things go through the court in a timely fashion and everything gets done in the system in an organised fashion. Whereas the solicitor is trained in the procedures of the court, proper order, how to present them, how to speak to the judge, how to the legal terminology, lawful terminology, etc. So that's why you employ the lawyer, the solicitor. But it doesn't take away from the fact that he's supposed to represent you. Say, well, does he not know better than you? He's supposed to represent you. So if it has been accepted by the High Court that these schedules must be tested, or these legislations must be tested, well, then that's where the deal is sealed. So once they've said they will test it, they must test it. They can't then put that back on your doorstep, because they've already accepted that it should be tested. And not only in one court, but in the circuit court and the High Court, they have submitted it as having to be scheduled and having to be tested. And now they're saying, well, it still remains an open question for a more appropriate case. What's this more appropriate case that they're alluding to? When? Who's going to bring it about? Who's going to pay for it? Why is it more appropriate? None of this has been addressed. Why is this current case that was extant prior to them concluding, failing to tell me that they had done so, and then many days later emailing me with basically a link to what the courts.a put up, and no personalized message. Say, this is what happened in court, that's what happened in court, we did this, we did that, we did communication, nothing. You get better communication buying a cup of coffee. Do you want to do it? Okay, yeah. The sugar's over there. So you know where you're at. They give you your orientation. They did none of that. But you still want to be paid. They still want to be paid. Do you think that the High Court judge was paid for her lack of a conclusion? Or her lacking conclusion? Aren't they the same thing? Isn't a lacking conclusion a lack of a conclusion? So therefore she hasn't fulfilled her role, or the judge of the High Court. But if the judge of the High Court doesn't fulfill their role, nobody else can. So this goes back to reviewing what the judge of the High Court is now doing. And that has to be done in a court of appeal or in the Supreme Court. So now a judge of the High Court is under judicial review. Just as easy as plenary proceedings would be submitted. So do they want to do it right? At High Court level? Or pursue it higher up? Is that the goal? To bring this to the highest court so they can implement it at a European level? We have case law. Is that what they're trying to do here? Because corrupt people are always trying to implement corruption. And the higher up they can bring it, the better for them. But if they can't get paid lower down because they haven't done their job, why would you expect them to suddenly start doing their job higher up in the higher courts? Why should they be given that opportunity to drag something to a higher court? They shouldn't be paid at the level they're at. They should be told, you need to bring this through the High Court properly. You didn't do it right the first time. Do it. Do this right. Isn't that what we're saying? We want a more appropriate case. There's no more appropriate case. It has to be the same case done right. That would be more appropriately done. But it would be the same schedule, just done to fulfillment, with everything that was requested to be brought forth and tested. Otherwise, I can't justifiably pay counsel if they're saying, yeah, we'll bring the testing section 7, yep, we'll do that, and then they don't. The High Court says, yeah, it's in the schedule, we'll test the 115, 117, and then they don't. Neither party should be paid. Neither party's doing right with the Irish people. It's no surprise they don't want to publicise it. They're exposed in it. They're sitting there in a big muddy puddle. I'm not paying for it. Are you? Since when could a member of An Garda Síochána take a complaint off a member of the public against another member of the public, play judge, jury and executioner there and then, tell the person they have to stop doing what is only hearsay, or they'll tell them to stop doing it again a few more times, and then act out of their jurisdiction in a civil court, showing bias against you, or rather towards the complainant, foregoing presumption of innocence, jurisdiction, impartiality, and every precept that a guard must comply with, simply because they said so in legislation and directed them towards the civil court. Guard has no place in the civil court for that reason, because he's not a guard in there. He's only a guard in a criminal jurisdiction. He's just another man standing around in the civil court. He doesn't have any jurisdiction. So there you are in the civil court listening to a man standing around, wasting civil court time and paying everybody for the privilege. Now you're aiding and abetting that hideous gathering. Do you see how evil it is? I'll go out again now. You see how it is? There are evil spirits operating behind the scenes, corrupting mankind so that he will even ignore what is basically logical in law, even though it's written in black and white on paper. Because evil spirits don't care about the laws of man. They want to corrupt them. Did you hear that laugh? When I said they want to corrupt them. They're really operating. It's real, guys. So should I go about paying somebody who hasn't done the job they told me they would do, according to the specifications I asked them to do? Now, of course, you take into account that there are certain procedures to be followed in the court, but when it's blatantly obvious that they haven't done that either, then they haven't represented the state properly, they haven't behaved in the court properly, the judge hasn't represented the Constitution, which can be shown in many places. It's just been a no-show from start to finish. An absolute no-show. Yet they're still telling me, oh, you're perfectly fine. You can go back to preaching. Well, if I'm perfectly fine and I can go back to preaching, why hasn't that been followed through in the court? Why aren't all the corollaries and extensions and knock-on effects of that being implemented by the High Court? Why are they failing so horribly at their job and still wanting to be paid? Since the 16th of June, I haven't heard what went on in the court. And my counsellor on holidays. Well, people go on holidays, that might be just coincidental. No, all of them. They've left me talking to the secretary. I got an email saying, you fill this out, and then when you come to the office up here, so you fill out your means testing form there, and you come to us right at the office, and we'll talk to you. You'll speak to, won't be actually who you're looking for, it'll be somebody else. It'll be the barrister. You'll speak to the barrister there. Oh, now the barrister wants to talk to me in the absence of the solicitor? Where's he gone? On holidays. I was so surprised that he doesn't want to look me in the eye after what he's done and failed to do. Is it? So, no, they won't be getting the means testing form. Absolutely not. Because I won't aid them and abet them in this corruption. And I simply can't rightly stand before you and ask you to pay that High Court judge by vindicating the misconduct, by deeming it worthy of payment. I can't do that. That would be contributing to and conspiring with those powers. Even if I disagreed with them, I would be facilitating them. Plus, they're not in a position to ask me to give them my means, and they haven't communicated the intentions of the court to reimburse or compensate, which is the responsibility of the court. So if it's the court's responsibility right now, and it should have been actually in their conclusion as to how they intend to go about doing that, it should have actually been part of the case. That should have actually been an ongoing concern in the case. Should it be found that I was mistreated, it might even be part of the same case, that it would be in the conclusion how this person is going to be vindicated, compensated for this evil done to their life. But the High Court has now corroborated and ratified as being the case. Yes, we do see this man has been treated wrongly. That's why his convictions are quashed. You can't be in both positions. You can't say, no, he wasn't treated wrongly, but he's free to go. That can't be logically the case. So what do we do? Do we pay them and leave it at that? Of course not. Sure, that would be contributing. Now you're monetarily contributing. Now I'm asking the taxpayer to pay it because I'm out of work. How would I be any better than them? They're asking you to pay them for their misconduct. Then I'd be further asking them to pay them for their misconduct, even though I'm fully aware that I've been mistreated. According to basic standards of merchantable quality service. If it's not fit for purpose, you don't pay for it, guys. If it's not of a merchantable quality or a merchantable standard, it doesn't get sold. And if it is, it doesn't last long on the shelves because people don't buy it. And then it's just taking up space on the shelf. Well, I'm not buying this. And you shouldn't want to either. Because if they told me that I've been mistreated under those sections, it's only a logical corollary, an extension, that those sections must be unconstitutional. What else can you deduce? Pin it on the man, pin it on the conduct of the man, pin it on the man. Where's the fall guy? But they're failing to test the constitutionality of the sections. So the judge is their fall guy, because the judge is not fulfilling the schedule. They just made a judge the fall guy. A judge of the High Court. Should they fail to, as a matter of first importance, rectify this situation? But I don't accept that they didn't know what they were doing. They're too learned for this. This is fundamental to law. What they've overlooked, or stepped over rather. Well, Sometimes you step over something onto something worse. And you fall right through. Step over that hole onto that board and that board's rotten through. Well, you go right through it, don't you? And that's effectively what's after happening here. They're exposed in their corruption and they need to rectify this. I can't pay for it because that would be using your money for corruption. That would be like paying a drug dealer out of your money. And it's money you contribute in the tax you pay that facilitates me when I'm out of job to put food in my mouth. Just like when I'm working, the tax I pay goes to pay for you when you're injured or out of work or whatever it is, so that there's a sort of like a float in society that keeps everybody with their basic needs. So I can't use your money like that to aid and abet them in something that they weren't even willing to publicize. Not only did they fail to publicize it to the Irish people, they failed to make me aware of what was going on. It's rotten to the core. And now it's exposed. Pay for it? Means test? Means test what? I'm unemployed. In order to be on social welfare, you already have to have means so to justify your payment. You had to go through a means test to be on unemployment payment. Salt in the wound? Sipping pina coladas? Do they think it's going to be that simple? How can I give them a means test if they haven't fulfilled the basic reimbursement of the surety? They haven't even given me back what's mine. The surety. They say, you give us 1,500 euros. You haven't a centimetre to budge. The means testing can only be done after what has already been established as being necessitated, and that is the vindication of my property rights. Not only the reimbursement of a surety of 1,500 euros, which they haven't done to date, but they're asking me to submit a means test prior to any of that occurring. That would be fundamentally inaccurate. They're asking me to even think about their being paid and my contributing to that, even though they haven't done what I've asked them to do. Those who call themselves my counsel are corrupt, utterly corrupt, and have failed in their station to represent me. The High Court have failed the Irish people and me. They've utterly failed at every juncture and haven't kept me in the loop on basic administrative things. But yet they want to be paid while they're on holidays. Well, that's not going to happen. But that might come between you and your pina colada, but that's not going to happen. That might give you cause to look up out of your seat or behind your sunglasses when you're trying to ride the Irish people, saddle them and use their taxpayers' money so that you can further corrupt the state and its constitution, how it's perceived by the public. That might give you something to think about, would it? If you're on holidays and somebody said you're not getting paid. Or should you pay the painter who went on holidays when he was supposed to paint the house, but didn't? And then we'll talk to you when you've paid us. We'll talk to you about how we didn't paint the house. But whatever we do, we'll do it in an interesting way. How can you make it sound interesting and flowery how you didn't paint a wall when you're supposed to? If anyone can do it, a barrister at law can. So go and speak to him, not me. Speak to the barrister at law. He'll tell you in a flowery way, with flowery language, how he utterly failed to do right by the Irish people and properly represent the Constitution when he said he was going to represent you in the High Court of the land. Rum, rum, rum. On my motorbike. So, what's happening? Not payment. Not by my hand. Not by my ratification. I'm telling you now, they don't deserve payment. They haven't represented me. Neither the High Court have represented the Irish people or the Irish Constitution, nor have those who called themselves my counsel and my representatives actually counselled or represented me properly and according to how I instructed them to, and to how they agreed with me was the proper way forward. They haven't actually done that. So how can I then say, well, you failed to represent me, you failed to do right by the Irish people? That's been clearly seen. Anybody with basic logic can see that, yet here's a check, have a nice holiday. But that would be basic. You might as well be sitting on the lounger beside him, supping out of the same glass, high-fiving him. But that wouldn't be you in ignorance being used as a pawn, and that wouldn't give him as much to savour when he sips the colada, you know? Oh, the little pawn, yeah. Look how he betrayed you and used you as a little pawn. And all you have to do now is tell us how poor you are, and then we can go get paid, right? So what do you think? Would I be doing right by you if I did that? Would I? Using your money like that? When they failed in to address what should have been addressed and was scheduled before the High Court of Ireland. Yet they said you're free to go back preaching, you did nothing wrong in the first place. But we'll use you as a pawn anyway. And keep you quiet for 2 years. They didn't really take anything from me because it was on lockdown, but effectively in terms of, you know, the actual ability to outreach many people, because people were in their houses, the majority of them, for a lot of that time. But it's not the point. The point is that it was exposed how corrupt they are. And it didn't cost a great deal in terms of broadcast. Didn't cost any money yet. But I wonder, are you concerned that the High Court judge might have been paid already, even though they didn't fulfill the schedule? Do you care about your taxpayers' money? Or are you happy to pay those who might even be considered as criminals, should it be shown that they knowingly failed to fulfill their constitutional obligations in their office? if they were brought under judicial review at a higher court. What do you think? It's District Court, Circuit Court, High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court. I think that's the order. Praise the Lord. Jesus is the one who institutes all power on the earth, and nothing can come to pass without his knowing and allowing. But he will work all things for the good of those who love him, rest assured. And he can change the face of the earth. He can remove something hideous like a legislation that is attempting to decay or eat away at the good root and the good leaven of society, or is trying to facilitate the harassment and limit the outreach of the gospel. He can, through the faith of one man, remove it. Because God works in the earth by faith. And though we don't always speak perfectly, we make mistakes or error in speech, because we're just little men, his spirit and his authority, his power is working there. And they almost submit to him. It's for his glory that we are relatively weak, relatively simple in the earth. Clay vessels, clay jars to contain his glory. So that you can't attribute the glory to the clay jar. Isn't that beautiful? So the Lord's glory is seen. So no, we shouldn't pay a painter who doesn't paint the wall. Now if he paints it, he doesn't paint it because he can't or he's injured his arm. That's a different thing, because he wills to and intends to paint the wall. So do you let him go hungry while his arm is healing? No. Well, that wouldn't be doing right by him. But if he knowingly refuses to paint the wall, goes on holidays and asks for the check before he'll even see you again, make sure it cashes the whole lot before he sees you. He didn't really care about painting the wall, did he? Just wanted to bring you for a ride. Use you as a pawn to fulfill his ends. But Jesus is Lord. And so that those who are evil and corrupt in the world must recede in Jesus' name. Praise the Lord.